Today, we're excited to talk a little bit about Voyage. And one of the important parts of Voyage is making sure that we have a nice visual identity and a logo and a brand. And so, we wanted to talk a little bit about that today and explore some of that with you and break down a bit of um, how we arrived at what we did and also hear a little bit of your feedback before we start using this in more places. Um, so to introduce that, we're going to bring um, one of our team members in, Parker. Parker is a senior designer on our team and brings a lot of experience, and I'll let him share a little bit about his experience as he comes on. So um, we'll welcome Parker. Hey, Parker,
Hey,
how you doing?
good. How are you, Devin?
Good. Well, before we get started, I was wondering maybe if you want to share a little bit with the community about your background, your experience, especially as we're thinking about branding and visual identity. Um, you know, why did you get the lucky assignment to work on this?
Yeah. So, yeah, a little about my background. I have been designing and helping brands for a little over 15 years in my career. Kind of started out in e-com marketing space, and then as my career evolved, moved into many different design projects, everything from branding and packaging to UX, UI websites to apparel and anything in between. So there's kind of consider myself a little bit of a broad, multidisciplinary designer to a degree. So it's been really fun and yeah, came in to help y'all with figuring out the the identity of Voyage, which is more than just the colors and the fonts and the mark, but really understanding the what's at the core and the heart of the brand. So
Awesome. Um, let's see. My sound is a little low today. I don't know what is going on with that. Oh well, we'll have to fiddle with that later. Live issues. Um, cool. So let's get into a bit about branding and logos and some of that in general. Um, as we explore um, doing the visual identity for Voyage, I think there's a couple goals that we had that we wanted to do. One is, um, I think we're looking to help to capture that Voyage is a different experience from AI Dungeon. Uh, I think we want to honor what AI Dungeon is, but also make the brand a bit more welcoming to a wide variety of people and content. I think that's maybe one thing that we've learned with AI Dungeon. It was created with this idea of like an AI driven Dungeons and Dragons essentially, and our branding has sort of reflected that. It's I mean even in the name it's AI Dungeon. Our branding has been very fantasy oriented, and as we've kind of thought about Voyage, we've realized that uh, I mean, really, even AI Dungeon is broader than just fantasy. People do a lot of different types of content on that, and so we've really sort of realized that as we look for a direction for Voyage, we want to think in terms of like a platform that's encompasses a number of different types of experiences and genres and play styles. And so I think you'll see some of that as we go through today. So Parker, maybe if you want to kind of kick off, and I'll let you sort of drive. And for everyone that's following along, Parker's put together sort of a brand guide for our team internally. And so we'll be walking through some of that, and then trying to talk through a little bit of like the behind the scenes of some of the decisions that went into the the thinking that went into the decisions that you'll be seeing. So go ahead,
awesome.
Parker.
Yeah, no, that's great. And feel free to jump in anytime because you have a lot of context here. We've worked closely together on this. So yeah, I think so. Just a couple of things. To start off, I just want to kind of call out some of the there's so many facets go into kind of creating a cohesive brand. And obviously one of those is, speaking with our team, and in particular kind of the leadership team, and discussing, initially jumping into the project, what are some of the constraints for the project, right? And I just wanted to mention those here just because I think it provides really valuable context. And one of those constraints off the bat was that we felt, there was a consensus that we wanted to focus on a word mark. And early on, I kind of even, mentioned to the team, looking at some examples of other, platform, brands or games, and things like Minecraft or Roblox or Fortnite, right? And looking at, do we want to have something that has some type of, icon or moniker or symbolism that's kind of, baked into the mark. Or there are others like Fortnite that really don't have that Fortnite logo. I mean, there are some earlier versions where there's some symbolism, but the main mark that you see, very regularly is void of any icon or moniker. And I think that they really did a good job of building the personality of the brand into the mark. And so that was kind of one of our early constraints, is that we wanted a word mark, and we wanted something that didn't have any literal symbolism, but might have some more subtle symbolism just in the form of the word mark itself. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Devin, but that was one of the kind of the earlier constraints I think is important to mention here. So
No, I agree, and I think that if people aren't familiar with a word mark, it's basically a logo without a um, kind of symbol or icon with it, and it's pretty common with platforms, as Parker mentioned. A lot of games are that way too. In fact, very few games have like an icon logo with them. Almost all of them are all word marks. I mean, even if you think about like AAA games, like I don't know, Call of Duty or you know NBA 2K. Well, I guess NBA 2K has like the NBA logo, right? But they don't have their own sort of like icon. Their games tend to be represented by these word marks, which is kind of like the stylized text that becomes iconic for that game. So that's the direction that we want to follow here.
yeah, that's awesome. I'll go ahead and even just share here. You mentioned the brand guide. I'd love to just kind of peek at that. This is still a little bit of a work in progress, but as you know, um, it'll kind of help frame up some of the conversation here. So let me bring that up. And while I'm doing that, one of the key aspects of building a cohesive brand, is really understanding who you are at your core, as I mentioned. And so it's really, when you think of brands uh, that you know and love, you have an emotional connection to them, or they give off a vibe or a feel. And so the brands that do it well, that's not an accident. That's very much on purpose. And so we really wanted to give some deep thought into that. And so, in addition to some of the constraints early on, in terms of like, hey, here's kind of generally what we want to do, for our brand, we dove in a lot deeper to uh, flesh out a few principles or brand principles that would help us really know who we are, and know what the target is that we're trying to hit with this brand exploration. So I think it's worth just kind of peeking at those here. The first one being adaptive, the second human, thoughtful, and imaginative. And I'll just kind of touch briefly on those each. So with the space that we are in creating this platform where you can be anyone and do anything and go anywhere, it felt really important that our brand is adaptive, because that's the experience that players can expect from Voyage. And it really is something that is a differentiator for us from other games and other platforms and other brands, in that the world, you can create the world that you want to create and explore so many different variations of that there's not a pre-programmed story or NPC that acts just one certain way. And so this was a really, really important tenet for our brand, was adaptability. The second is the human element of it, or kind of humanity. And I think anytime you hear Nick uh, talk about Voyage, very much there's an element of storytelling that is really strong within our brand. And often when Nick talks about storytelling, he brings up the fact that it's a human thing. Storytelling, it's innately human. And so this was a really important aspect, that even though it's a digital experience and we're using AI technology and these different things, at its core, it's human, not only in the sense that storytelling is human, but the connections that are made, and whether it's with friends or even NPCs that are evolving with AI, there's definitely a human emotion and element that's brought in there, that's really strong. So human and humanity is a really important tenet of the brand as well.
And this one's kind of unique too because I think it differentiates a little bit from, well, not differentiates, but I think it's a little bit of a counter positioning with a lot of other AI products, you know, that feel very tech oriented, very kind of robotic. And I think one of the things that we've learned, like playing with Voyage, especially in multiplayer, is like the platform actually brings people together. So in some ways, it's using AI to build connection and to have more human experiences. And storytelling is a way for us to explore who we are, explore different parts of our personalities, explore, you know, characters and emotions that, you know, maybe we can't experience in real life, but you know, embodying these stories allow us to explore what it means to be human as well, which I think is this really kind of expansive philosophy of what Voyage is and why people enjoy it. So um, having this human aspect to the brand, I think is helps to convey that and help people understand, you know, emotionally, like storytelling is about people. And to your point, Parker, on like storytelling being such an innate human experience, like stories have been around for as long as language. So it's such a deep part of who we are, and I really love this part of our brand.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's such a special thing because, like I said, I think you make a great point that it is a differentiator for us. Like we want people to have those emotional connections. We want people to feel those. Like I remember Nick talking about a scenario that he played through where the the big bad, for lack of a better word, in the end, that there kind of became this shift of the relationship with himself and the big bad over time, and that this like there came this time where or a point in the scenario where he could slay the big bad and chose not to, and it actually this like bad guy, for again lack of a better term, shifted, and the relationship changed to the point that they formed a bond and formed a relationship, and the bad became good over time. And it was just this like very interesting, like, where do you see that in a game, that like my choice to choose to not to slay this character in this instance had real repercussions that were really interesting and really emotional and really deep. And so it's just such a great call out that like we want to foster those human emotions and experiences and connections, and it's just something that's really really special when it happens.
Yeah, one more example, and then sorry to keep harping on this one, but like we even had someone on Reddit recently share a snippet of their story where they were deep in the story, and one of the kind of characters they'd built this relationship with, like on their adventure, like died, and they were like devastated, and you know, kind of felt that emotional weight. Like this is kind of why storytelling has such an emotional impact on us in this human aspect. So anyway, this
Awesome.
is an important one.
For sure. Moving on, the next is thoughtful, and for those who are listening or will see this, I can tell you that the Latitude team is extremely thoughtful, which is something that I love about this team. Uh, Decisions aren't just made on the fly. We as a brand really care about player value and experience, and decisions are thought through and given just a lot of attention. And there's something really special about that to me, that uh, in this day and age of just like quick delivery on so many things, or cheap lower quality things, it's just so nice to have a group of people who really care about connecting with the players that they're serving and really giving deep thought. And sometimes that can probably feel a little slow on the player end in terms of delivering certain things, but it's so much better to take that little bit of extra time and to be really thoughtful. And so we really wanted to, as you're seeing here in this, even just in the logo exploration, this has been a process that we started, 6 months ago or so, and went through a lot of iterations and just had a lot of deep thought into the whys behind the decisions that went into the logo, but the brand as a whole. So this is another really important tenet for us. And then the fourth is imaginative, and this uh, this obviously goes into we're creating a platform that creators can create, and when you talk about storytelling and gaming, creativity and that imagination is something that's so key and so important. I know some people on the team have kind of described it at times of that feeling of like being a kid under the covers with the flashlight reading reading a book at night, or that story that you're just captivated in. And I think that we really want to capture that as a brand and help people kind of feel that sense of creativity and limitless. I mean, we use limitless somewhat loosely, but to a degree, a limitless place where you can explore anything that you can imagine. And I just think that's such a special, again, kind of a special aspect of the brand. Where in so many other platforms and games, you're locked into a specific storyline or something where you're not able to really tap into that creativity and imagination. And I will just say, just having seen what has been created by so many of our creators, I'm in awe at many times of like, how did they come up with this, or where did this thought come from? And it's just so fun to really see a community that embraces this and creates some really interesting and amazing things. So
Yeah, I'd even say like I think this is one critique I have of the AI Dungeon brand. I don't feel like it evokes that same imagination imaging with excuse me, at least for me it feels a little bit more narrowed and um constrained, but like because we hear players sometimes come into the platform and be like, holy cow, there's a lot of things that you can do here. Or even getting into the game experience and then realizing that, wow, so I can really kind of take this any direction that I want to. So I think um, having imagination as one of kind of the core brand pillars helps. It's going to make sure that like everything that we put out, the way that we um, represent Voyage starts to evoke that emotion of imagination, which will be really great.
yeah, no, I love that. So yeah, I think without further ado, we could kind of jump into the logo here, unless there's
Let's do
anything
it.
else you wanted to touch on. Cool.
Let's do it.
So yeah, so with just given kind of the context of those some of the constraints that we had in early conversations, there was a deep exploration we had. Yeah, I mean, we went through dozens upon dozens of different early concepts and sketches and marks that kind of led to our current the current logo as it stands. So without further ado, the Voyage logo. And I'll kind of go through here briefly, what went into the mark and kind of the thinking behind it in kind of the next slide here. So a few things. As I mentioned, we knew we wanted to do a word mark, and we knew that we wanted to kind of build into it some symbolism that would really represent our brand and these principles that we just went through. So one of the first keys that I'll call out here in the mark is that we wanted to communicate story, as story is such an important element of the brand. And so we kind of worked in a this dropping curve at the top of our letter forms here, and that curvature really represents story and story arc. Because if you think of most stories or a typical story, at the beginning of the story, the character is in some form of normal life or stasis, and then something comes along and disrupts that stasis, right? The conflict emerges and comes into view, and we see the character, the main character, struggle through that until resolution of that story, where we come back to some form of stasis or resolution. And so we really wanted to again kind of think how we could bring in story as as a form within this word mark, and this was a really strong way to do that. So again, it's subtle, which was actually another one of the constraints I failed to mention at the beginning coming into this, that we did want our the way that we were communicating some of these things to be visible, but also to be subtle, where they're not, no one thing is taking over too much or drawing too much attention to itself. So, yeah, the curve here at the top represents that story arc, represents the imagination that goes into storytelling, and also kind of the adaptability of the brand as well. We also looked at a few different ways to kind of represent emergence. We've talked a lot about, internally at least, about kind of the emergence of the gameplay. And if you think of Voyage or within AI Dungeon, the story unfolds before you, right? As I mentioned before, like there's no set story that you are following as you do in many games, or in the way that you do in other games, where everything is kind of pre-planned, right? You have your cutscene when you make it to this milestone, and your cutscene when you make it to this milestone, and everything, like everyone ends up kind of essentially playing the same game in many, in most games, in most gaming, and so we really wanted to communicate the emergent gameplay that happens with AI, where there is no pre-planned, like you don't know what's going to happen a week from now, in the game and in the story, and so that emergence is really important. And so we looked at just a very subtle forward tilt of the letter forms that represents that emergence, represents kind of the innovation. Like this platform of Voyage is such an innovative thing, marrying AI with creation and gameplay and role playing and all these things that are so fun to see come together. And it's kind of this dawn of a new era of gaming, that we really wanted to represent that in some way. And so that's kind of where the forward tilt comes into play. Another element that we looked at is, going back to our human element. We knew that we wanted a little bit of like asymmetry and imperfection in our letter forms. And so you can see here whether it's the uneven space here in the E, or some corners are a little more rounded than others. Just those subtleties add just a little bit of a human element and a little bit of adaptability or approachability to the brand. We want it to feel approachable and friendly, but we wanted it to have kind of that human element in it as well. And then the final thing that I'll call out here, we kind of took the crossbar of the A and the counter of the G here, and then the middle bar of the E as well, and kind of tied them together. And we actually did it with the same, I guess, vector as you're seeing here in this, in the curvature at the top of the letter form. So we tied those together, and we felt that really represented connection, that we're trying to build within the platform, and also just kind of, and what kind of emerged from that was kind of this idea of like pathways, because we kind of have this, and that's what these kind of lines represent here, is we have this pathway that emerges, and we have this other pathway, and the we're not a true, like, I mean, I don't know if I'd call it a choose your own adventure. That probably devalues the magic that is behind Voyage, to simplify it that much. But there is that aspect of like a choose your own adventure. And so as we realized that, we can take these two lines and kind of create pathways, and potentially use those as a visual indicator within the brand. And you've already seen those as we've kind of scrolled through this. It just may not have made sense until now that that's what those were. So as you kind of see these, crossing lines, it kind of represents the cross paths, or the paths that could be taken, and where choice leads you on a different trajectory. And so, we've kind of visualized that a little bit further down here. I'll kind of just run through. These are
Before
some of
we,
the colors. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I
Sorry.
was gonna say, before we get too far ahead, if you want to go
Yeah.
back to your typography one, because like one thing I want to
Yeah,
point
please.
out, um, like the thing that's really hard now. Some of like my background is in UX design, and I'm not the same. I'm not nearly the caliber of designer as Parker, but enough to kind of appreciate the details here. But like one of the things that's really hard with logo design, particularly with a word mark, is capturing some of the symbolism that Parker is talking about, but doing it in a way that doesn't draw attention to itself, but still creates the right emotion. And so there's so much subtlety to here, but like I'm looking at the comments and it feels like there's been generally a positive reception to this. It's not very on the nose. It's it's subtle, like the subtle tilt. Um, gives just enough of that kind of like feeling of progression, and the slight curvature, the and like one of the things I love the most about this is, Parker, you talked about the imperfections of how like the strokes on the letters are maybe just a little bit uneven. Some are a little bit thicker and some are a little bit thinner. It's one of those things where it's like if you don't see it immediately, but your brain actually sort of picks up on these clues and starts to draw conclusions based off of it. And it's based in sort of like, the evolutionary way our brains work is that we sort of associate shapes and irregularities with things that are organic and handcrafted, rather than being sort of like precision manufactured, and the roundedness on the corners. So I love how all these details come together to really capture the brand pillars that we talked about. And that's why we wanted to start there, because we wanted to help you understand, like, we wanted this to convey a certain emotion, and making sure that the subtle symbolism kind of tapped into that. So anyway, wanted to just kind of emphasize that. And Parker, you'll be pleased to know that where you're going next, there's a lot of comments of like, is the logo just going to be all white? Is it going to be used in a different way? All the different places that we can use it. So I think where you're going next is right where the comments are interested in seeing.
Awesome. And I appreciate the call on the comments because I'm just going through my screen share here and I'm not seeing those. So I really appreciate that. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to answer that question, uh, we don't know. We sort of know. We're working it out. And I'll just kind of dive ahead. This is a little bit just on how to kind of treat the brand. This is a little bit more for kind of, internal applications and whatnot. But one of the other tenets without going, we can start to look at color as well as as it relates to the brand. But one of the other aspects, obviously, with the brand is our color palette. And in the past, we have had, with AI Dungeon or with Latitude, there have been very specific colors that have been the dominant brand color. And I have had a hypothesis that we may want to veer away from a singular brand highlight and actually try to adapt to a broader palette, for a couple of reasons. One really primary reason, which speaks to the going back to that adaptability concept, right? Like, we are a platform where you can create a world where everyone is a transdimensional space slug, and or you can create a world where everyone has four arms, or you can create a world where whatever, it can be fantasy, it can be sci-fi, it can be whatever. And so why limit ourselves to a single color when we can show a broad range of colors that kind of represent that creative freedom, and that broad range of things that you can experience on the platform. So we likely will roll out an initial version that does lean into the white and the black usages of it, just because knowing the initial uses of it, we probably will, for instance, on a website or in the app, we'll probably start there. But I think we will look for ways to bring in a broader color scheme. And so you're kind of seeing that here. This was an initial palette that we are really kind of running with, that feels, again, kind of broad. And there's some colors that work really well with, where I know that we have a lot of, there's a lot of dark within the app, obviously, just within AI Dungeon. I think we're moving into a space, and I'm sure it's tough to kind of see it coming through on the screen share here, but something that is actually a little lighter, and feels a little softer in terms of like the on a scale of black to white, and all the shades of gray in between. We're looking for something that feels a little bit soft and easy to read as you're reading large blocks of text and things along those lines. So I think some of the early implementations will be white and black, but I look for ways that we can bring in color, whether and if it's not directly with the logo itself, within the experience. where not only as a brand are we trying to represent like the broadness of the platform, but where creators have a lot of options coming in to choose different colors to represent different elements of their world and of their story. So yeah, this is the palette that we have been running with currently as we've been building out the brand. Again, there's a lot more that goes into this. Just kind
One
of
thing
even
I'll call out
skipping.
too,
Yeah,
like it's really
yeah,
important that a
please.
logo is adaptable to a lot of places. Like some logos are really hard. Like I think Microsoft is a famous one where they have like the the Windows logo, where they have like the window and then like the different colors within the windows. And like for a long time that's been hard because you like without the color like it doesn't show up very well, and they can't put it over certain like colored backgrounds. And like in modern times they've actually redesigned the logo so that it can be just kind of like a simple single color, and it can go in a monochromatic space. So like to your point, we have to have that foundation, and then we can start to layer in sort of more creative ways of using color and using the logo in different fun ways. But we kind of have to have that kind of starting point.
For sure, and this may be a maybe not the best comparison, and I'm not. I'm sure there are plenty of us on even on our own team that are not necessarily Apple fanboys or whatever. But like, if you think of like many brands do use an anchoring color. So if I think of T-Mobile, you think of pink, and if I think of State Farm, I think of red, and if I think of Best Buy, I think of blue and yellow, right? Like brands do have those core colors, but when I say Apple, to their credit, I don't think you could attribute a specific color to them, and yet they use color a lot throughout the brand, and so I use that just as one example where I think that we can utilize color in a lot of different ways that keeps things really interesting and really fun without having to feel like this is the limiting. Again, it always goes back to those brand principles like, hey, we want to be an adaptable brand that has a lot of options for scalability and for imagination and for all these things. And if we tie ourselves into like, okay, well, here's our one color, we've really set up a very stiff constraint that doesn't allow for that adaptability. So I'll just again, these are somewhat in flex at the moment, but we even kind of went through and thought of the naming of the colors, which for no better purpose than that does it kind of helps evoke the feel of the color in the same way that the brand name and the brand look help evoke a feel. And so we kind of looked at this again, softer gray that you're seeing here, calling it onyx. This is not a true white. There's a little bit of warmth to it, so it's a little bit of an off-white. We're calling that veil. And then we are playing with a few gradients that may or may not be used based on kind of the broader palette here. But yeah, we have an astral blue. Flux is our green. Arc is kind of our yellowish orange. Rift is our red that really has some earthy tones to it, and then Bloom is kind of our yeah, I guess pinkish purple. I was trying to think of you're like, this is the designer. I don't have sometimes my nomenclature is very very basic here, but
You don't have the
yeah.
Sherman Williams like
Yeah, I don't
catalog in
have.
your head that you can riff
Yeah, I
off.
don't have I don't have the PMS right in my head, the exact Pantone color. So,
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah, this is kind of a broad range. That again, one of the tenets with these initial colors is that they would stand off of this kind of softer black that we're using, or this onyx color that we're using, and because there are many places where we want these colors to shine through to highlight important aspects, whether it's in the UI of the platform or from any branded or marketing materials. So yeah, I think
It might
yeah,
be
I'll
interesting.
pause there. I'm not sure what. Yeah, go ahead.
It might be interesting as well. And if you want a sec to prepare it, like it might actually be interesting to have people see kind of the logo. Like I know you've kind of put the logo in a few different like an imagined like UX, and like like what it could look like if we were to host like a big kind of conference for creative. Like people might want to see like how that logo
Sure.
could look in some different places, because that might help. I think that'll help people understand sort of the adaptability of the logo, and like this is really just the starting point. We could we'll see using it in different ways, different places.
No, that's a great call out. And I would just give the disclaimer here that this is strictly visual. I did, it's really helpful as we're kind of, when we kind of build out brands to see things in context. And that's actually the purpose of this brand guide, partially, is it's really helpful to just see the things in many different contexts to make sure does it feel good across many different contexts. Going again back to adaptability, not to harp on that too much, but we have to make sure that it has broad usage. How's it going to look as an icon in an app? Do we ever, with the full word mark, it's going to get really small if we're, in a little, 50 pixel or 100 pixel by 100 pixel, thumbnail for social or what have you. So anyway, this is all just to say that it was really helpful to start seeing how it might look in context of a page. And so this was, again, just kind of placeholder content of like an explore, or if we were to kind of separate the create versus play experience on the platform, and if you were to come into that play or kind of discovery experience, what that might look like in context of some of these choices. So this was also kind of vetting out our the font that we were leaning toward as well, and then just kind of seeing the colors in context here. In fact, I don't know. This is going to be like I said,
Hang
you're
on, you
going to
should just
see.
pause on that, just in case people. Um, sometimes, like this is like one of many design pages. But I mean, just the dozens and dozens of iterations and explorations that go into something like this. It's often not appreciated. So it's sometimes fun to see these views of like, oh yeah, there's been a couple things tried out.
Yeah, many. Yes. Sometimes it's a throw something at the wall and see what sticks, and you have to kind of go through a lot of iterations. In fact, just to kind of like zero in on some of that, we explored. This is kind of to show those cross paths and how that kind of flourish is being used. And I actually didn't touch on that. I'll go back to that in just a second, just because I really love what emerged out of that. But you're seeing that implementation here. This was an earlier just kind of landing page concept, and everything's placeholder. And again, sometimes you have to explore some things like color in a logo, a broad spectrum, and see what may come of that. And so yeah, no, I think that's a great call out, Devin. There's a lot, and I actually was coming here to show that there might be instances of again highlighting different colors throughout the platform and throughout the app, where maybe in a certain like the create versus the play versus the discover. I mean, again, this is, I'm not trying to hint that this is the what will be. It was more just like what if, right? And so if we were to have some of these different sections on the site, we can use those colors as a way to highlight some of the different sections where, again, we're not tied into a single color, but we're showcasing a breadth of colors. So I did just want to go back to that point. I don't think I really highlighted this on the logo, but we did. I mentioned earlier that the curvature at the top of the letter forms, as well as the curvature here that ties the A, the G, and the E together, follow the same path. And so to kind of expand those, you can see those paths, and then by crossing them, this is where the flourish comes into play, and really kind of represents that. Like you'll have that moment in when you're playing where if I choose, choice. I mean, there's unlimited choices, but to take examples of like choice A and B, like A is going to take me on a trajectory this way, and B is going to take me on a trajectory that's totally opposite, and the game is going to evolve based on those choices, which is really fun. So this was yeah, just an element or a flourish that we will use in different places. So I just wanted to call that out, but kind of to go back to the implementation of the brand here. Again, you're kind of seeing some of the color usage that might change from section to section on, for instance, the site, and then some of those how some of those highlights might look in context of content. And this is all placeholder content, so again, nothing here is it's all
An exploration.
an exploration. Yeah, so But it's actually another kind of good call out because we did as we've kind of looked at how we want to represent Voyage from kind of a communications or side as we're connecting with our players. We want to feature a broad range of content. We had a discussion early on of like, and you kind of got a little sneak peek of it back here of some specific artwork, and we thought, okay, what is the artwork that will represent Voyage, right? We know that it's a game that or it's a platform where you can create experiences that people enjoy together, and so perhaps we should have a group of heroes that are together, and how can we represent that? And then there was a deeper conversation of, well, what should our art style be, and how should we, represent that, and how do we, do when character or when creators are creating worlds, like what does that look like, and what art styles exist there, and so there's so many really unique and fascinating things with this brand exploration that are so different from anything else out there. And this is one of those. And so as we kind of go back and look at these conceptual examples, another thought that we've had is that we'd like to feature a broad range again of art styles. So we have like things that are pixel art, and we have some anime styles, and we have some more cartoonish styles, and we have things that are a little bit ethereal. And so again, this was all in context of like our exploration, but we also realized we have a really great opportunity here to and you can kind of see that here in landing page concept that we were putting together that highlights again that broad range of content. And then we also realized like, hey, we have plenty of content from our creators that's amazing, and so there may be some really great opportunities to showcase creator content in a way that really frames up what the platform is all about. So
Yeah, and like one note on that that's a little tricky because this is where that that distinction between being a game and a platform really comes to play. If you think about something like Minecraft as being a very specific game, and they have a very specific sort of character style and the world, and that has a very kind of recognizable um, kind of it's immediately recognizable that you're looking at Minecraft, right? Um, and Roblox is also a platform, but they have a specific rendering engine, right? So even though Roblox allows creators um, to to build a variety of different experiences, they all have a very similar look because it's all coming from the single rendering engine. What's tricky with AI Dungeon and Voyage is we don't have a rendering engine, right? And in theory, we may actually allow players to have a variety of art styles for their specific world. Or over time, there will be different AI models that come out. And, when we're an AI native platform and an AI native game experience, it's hard to kind of think through, from a brand perspective, how do we be a window into the content the creators are making, right? Because like in a lot of ways, like our Voyage brand needs to get out of the way so that we can highlight creation in our creators more than we're highlighting our own brand. Um, while at the same time offering some sort of like recognizability so that if someone sees a Voyage world somewhere, that there's some sort of recognition like, oh yeah, you can go play that on Voyage. Um, and I don't know if we've fully solved that, and I think it's something that we'll probably get to um, over time, and kind of finding ways to kind of bring some of that recognition. Because like if you're like if you're a creator and um, you're trying to advertise and get people to come play your experience somewhere, it'll be you'd want some sort of recognizability so people know to go play it on Voyage. um, and so I think that's one thing that we're going to kind of iterate on over time, and maybe to your point, Parker, we're going to kind of align on a semi-consistent image style, or maybe we're trying to find ways to let creators make their own image styles, but maybe there's some other sort of brand element that we bring that kind of brings that recognition. But that is um, you know what's tricky is like in a lot of areas we can borrow best practices from other platforms like a Roblox or a Minecraft or a Fortnite, or even social platforms like YouTube or Twitter or Twitch. But um, in other areas, because we are an AI first experience, those rules don't apply. And this is one of those cases. And so this is one of those um, challenges that's probably unique to us, and we're gonna have to find a unique solution for it.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It is a unique situation. I can't think of another brand to like take inspiration from because it's such a unique challenge. And yes, that having something where people will recognize the brand is going to be challenging while also allowing for such a broad visual language of content types. So that'll be a fun and interesting problem to solve. But yeah, we have that's one of the many things that is still being kind of worked through. Like I mentioned, this brand guide is very much a work in progress still, and we're trying to cross all the T's and dot all the I's, but there's a lot more to do. So
Yeah. So maybe like one question that I think people have is, what is some of the what other work is left to be done on the brand? I've seen a few different questions around, what is the app going to look like? And I think in particular the icon that we're going to use for the app store for Android or iOS. What are you know is there is so I know we have some of that stuff. Like what other work do you see as being kind of unfinished that we're going to continue to explore with the brand?
yeah, great question. There's a lot that goes into that question actually because something we briefly touched on here, but we've only looked at a small percentage of this brand guide. And when you're creating a unique brand, there's so much more that goes into it than just the visual aspect. So I mentioned earlier, I kind of wanted to show that the constraints and the brand principles that kind of fed into the overall visual language. There's a lot more in terms of that that goes into even the way that we communicate as a brand and kind of the story that we're trying to tell as a brand. And so a great example of that is the icon, and we haven't solved that yet. So like I know that we use the in AI Dungeon, we use the AI Dungeon flame as like a loading icon, and we use it as the icon in many different places, and we're moving kind of to a word mark, and that was one of our constraints in the beginning, not having a specific icon or moniker. That's one of the many problems to solve. So yeah, just looking at things left to be done, the execution of a lot of the what I would call the design system of our platform is probably the biggest unknown and the biggest like chunk of work that is left to be done. So it's how do we tackle some of those nitty gritty things and getting very specific about whether it's the rounding of corners on our content cards or the iconography that we use or that there's so many like bits of execution of the brand that are still to be fleshed out that will heavily impact the app and the website and what have you. I called out the icon, kind of the loading screen. Like maybe there is, a new kind of animation, or maybe we do have something that's sort of like iconic that could exist that's not necessarily attached to the logo. So there may be visual language that comes out of this that we just that hasn't emerged yet, but is something that we're exploring. And then I think that the other piece, well, that I touched on briefly, is really just some of the core tenets of our messaging and our voice as a brand. So this is another thing like good brands know who they are at their core, and the purpose of the brand guide has many purposes. And one of my mentioned earlier is kind of seeing things in context. But another thing that's really important about it is just to have that alignment internally on like, here's who we are, here's how we appear, and how we talk and how we, all of the things. And anyway, so just knowing that that's another aspect that I think needs to be fleshed out a lot is just kind of our messaging and our voice as a brand a bit, and there's a bit more to be done on that. But the heavier lift or the bigger unknown for sure at this point, at least visually, are all of those small executions that make up a larger whole. So there's going to be quite a bit of an exploration that goes on there to really define all those things, and ideally what will come out of this is a brand or a design system specifically for the platform and the app that will define many of those, very specific kind of nuances of the brand. So I don't know. I don't know if that answered the question, but I'm sure there's a million things I've missed. There's a lot of work left. This is the answer, but there's a lot of unknowns still. But this initial like really trying to zero in on like how we want to look and feel. Like I said, this has been kind of a work in progress for the last 6 months. So definitely more to do, but what we have done to this point has actually been a very kind of overcoming a very big hurdle where I think those other things will start to emerge more and more as we every little piece of the brand that we define, it helps kind of has a waterfall or a domino effect where then it's easier to make those decisions and flesh out some of those unknowns. So
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. Like, you're right that the small execution details, they may not show up in the brand guide, because they may be kind of smaller. But I think for people who don't live in the world of design, what often happens is you may start with a nice high level concept like we have here, and as you get into the nitty gritty details, you might be like, "Ooh, that didn't work quite like I expected," and so we may actually make some changes kind of back in the strategy and be like, we need to adjust, like, I don't know if we probably wouldn't go this extreme, but like just as an example, it's like, we might need to adjust the typeface because it's hard to read at smaller sizes, or we may come back and decide, we need a seventh color. How many did you have? Was there six? Um,
yes, six like, and then the onyx and the veil color were kind of 7 and 8. So
yeah. So it's like
or
maybe we
sorry,
need
6 and 7. Yeah, 7 total.
perfect. So we might decide we need an eighth one, right? Or we may there could be some iteration that happens later as we get into the specifics. I also think the like you said, the finding there likely will be some sort of icon that goes, gets thrown in. A lot of people in the comments have mentioned sort of like the cardinal directions, kind of the compass style um, icon, which we didn't talk about that, but that was actually incorporated into a lot of your explorations with some of that iconography. And I think one of the reasons we didn't go that way is that it didn't feel adaptive enough. It almost started to steer kind of too far into this almost like adventure exploration mode, and it was incredible how just adding that small little element almost pushed it too far in that direction. But it could be, you could imagine maybe it's part of like an animation, to your point. So definitely some iteration that'll continue to happen on this, but um, overall, I think this is setting up the Voyage brand to be in a really, really, really good space.
Yeah, and I actually wanted to point out you mentioned just with these colors. So again, kind of the execution of it all, and going back to the adaptability and just the breadth of instances where something needs to work is a really difficult challenge. Having worked on a lot of brands, it's easy to design something that won't have a lot of broad application, right? And a lot of brands don't necessarily need that broad of an application as we're kind of mentioning here. And so just to illustrate that with this color exploration, one thing that's really important is to have high contrast so that you can read text on a certain color or see a logo on it or what have you. And the bare minimum standard in terms of accessibility is like a 4.5 to 1 ratio. And so we vetted each of these colors to make sure that there's a high enough contrast that we're well above that very baseline standard. So with white the white and the black here, the onyx and the veil color here, it's almost a 15 to 1 ratio from this light color to this dark color. And you can kind of see that we thought through the ratios in each of these to make sure that we have a high enough contrast. So this is all just to illustrate that, like, when you are building something that needs to scale so broadly, and to think through all those instances where I don't want the thing to break because I need to have thought through all those things. It's a really tough challenge to solve, but it just goes into the thought that is being put into this brand is vast. So
Yeah. Well, one series of questions from the chat is hamsters win. Um,
Hamsters win? Is that a question?
basically,
Oh,
yeah,
is that for our icon?
yeah. Well, and for those who aren't familiar, in our Discord in particular, the hamsters have been somewhat of like an ongoing running joke in our community because in the early days of well, it's hard to imagine, but at one point we actually didn't allow people to upload images for their scenarios, and so we added image upload, but we also had this like rating tool to make sure that images that were being uploaded were appropriate, and that rating tool flagged the most like cute and adorable hamster as being like totally inappropriate. So the hamster sort of became this mascot meme that's almost like a self-deprecating joke about the hallucinations of AI, which feels like an appropriate um, sort of uh, spirit animal, if you will, of the frailties of AI. But um, I think we've intentionally decided to not bring the hamster joke into our official branding.
You know what though? I want to make it my mission to bring it in terms of like we were talking about like what would we use instead of a flame icon? I think a hamster like running in place like, it would be perfect. I'm on a mission now. I'm on a mission now. I'm not gonna be able to let that go. So
Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
All right,
there
everyone.
could
We're inspired. Look,
you
keep
heard it
your
you heard it here first.
yeah. You've inspired Parker to go explore hamster icons.
I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a funny moment in AI Dungeon history when we're just like, how did the AI misrate this? Like, I mean, the image was so like cute and adorable. It's just a hamster. It was like, nope, not appropriate.
That is inappropriate.
It was terrible.
Oh,
Um,
that's fun.
well, Parker, any final thoughts from you on the branding? And I'm gonna watch chat for any kind of like final questions as well. Sometimes there's a delay, so it might take a second for those questions to
Sure.
come in. But any sort of kind of final thoughts on the branding that you'd want to share with the community before we close up?
Uh, no, just I guess just that there's I'm just very excited to see what comes out of this and to just see it in use and to see all like I mentioned, there's it really is awe-inspiring to see the the creative community at work, and so that's probably the thing that I'm most excited about when I think of the branding. Like we think of like we have some people on our team like, when are we going to get a hat with the logo on it or whatever, right? And it's like that's all fine and good, but I'm far more excited to see the way that our players use the brand and the way that they use the creative tools to create their worlds. So I just have a lot of excitement centered around the brand and to see what people do with it is kind of my final thought. So
Cool. Well, um, there's been a number of supportive comments. So I mean, thank you, Parker, for working on this. This is really awesome work, and I think, I, like you, I'm excited for having this represent Voyage. I think one of the things that um, was I don't know what the right word is. Like, there's almost a nervousness because I think for me at least, because we had like I think everyone had this high expectation for Heroes, which is now Voyage. The play experience was so like everyone's having so much fun playing for it. And it's like we really, really, really want this Voyage brand to represent like how much we love it, how much we think our players and our community is going to love it. And it's like, man, can we live up to that? And for me at least, this absolutely does, because like every time I see it, I'm like, oh yes, this is exciting. It represents who we are. It represents what we're trying to do. Landed landed the ship, or landed the
awesome.
plane, as they say. I don't know. Something landed.
Something landed somewhere. Yeah. Oh,
the
that's great.
The actual vessel is undefined.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Well, thanks
That's
everyone
great.
for participating on the live stream. Thanks Parker for coming on and walking us through. And obviously, just like with everything else, we'd love to hear your feedback. Love to hear your comments. Like as Parker said, as we continue to get further and further into the execution details, I think there is a lot of room for feedback and input. Let us know what you like. Let us know if there's anything that you feel like we could adjust and do better. And we're always happy to hear that feedback.
We'll make a book out of it. A
We'll
book
make
of
a book.
a book of feedback.
That's right. Yeah. This is what happens when I try to talk too fast. That's not my natural cadence. So I start stumbling over things.
You're
But
doing no, you're doing great.
all right. Well, thanks everyone, and thanks Parker. We'll see y'all later.
Thank you.